Part 2 about how my neighbors killed my dog. So like I said, my brother let the dog out, and my dog got the piece of plywood off of the door. And my brother had to crawl through the doggy door to get my dog out of our neighbor's yard, so that way our neighbors wouldn't wake up and know that he got through. But whenever my brother went to go get Gabe, he realized that my neighbors didn't even have a piece of plywood on their side of the fence or anything. So my brother told my dad, and my dad went over there the next day to talk to them. And he pretty much said, I'm not going to have a piece of fucking plywood on my side of the fence if you're not going to be doing anything on yours to prevent my dog from going into your yard. And they were like, oh, well, your old neighbors never took out the doggy door. And my dad was like, that's not our fucking fault. Well, then our new neighbors said, if your dog all of a sudden becomes sick or just does not come back, don't be surprised. My dad decided to replace the door himself. Well, once Gabe realized that the doggy door was gone, when we would let him outside, he would literally just sit there and bark at the fence. Well, 2 weeks later, Gabe ended up passing away, and we found out it's because our neighbors were giving him rat poison.
This is why you should never open your door for strangers. In 2013, a woman let her dog out to use the bathroom one more time before bed. After only a few minutes, she starts hearing scratching on her door, which is typically the sound her dog makes when he's ready to come in. But it just seemed way too soon for him to be done being outside. So she decides to look through the peephole to make sure it really is her dog. But what she sees is terrifying. A deranged-looking man is right outside her door, staring intently at her door handle, waiting for it to turn open. As she's looking in horror, unable to do anything, he starts scratching at the door as hard as he can, never leaving his gaze from the door handle. She manages to stifle a scream, she backs away and realizes her dog is still outside. So she goes to the side window, but there's no sign of her dog, and so she goes back to the door to see if maybe the man's moved. He hasn't moved, his mouth is open, and he's staring directly at the peephole. Then he turns around and walks away. With the man gone, she discovers her dog unharmed, his leash had just been cut. But that means he had a knife.
Story time about how I crashed my dad's really expensive car. So a little background information. My mom had just got remarried to my stepdad 3 years ago, and he was this rich asshole who owned a bunch of food trucks and thought he was the shit. Well, at the time I also had a boyfriend. And we had only been dating for like a month and a half. But my boyfriend would always beg me to let him drive my stepdad's car. And I always said no because that was like his child. Like he had children. He could care less about them. His car was more important. Anyway, so the one weekend my parents are out of town and one of my friends was throwing a graduation party. So that whole day my boyfriend was trying to talk me into taking the car. And I already knew where my stepdad hid the keys. So I just decided I wouldn't drink that night and I would just take the car. He kept asking me if he could drive, but clearly I said no, because this kid literally told me that he crashed the first 2 cars that he had. So we get to the party, we're having a good time, and one of my friends tells me that everybody's taking pictures with my car outside. Like for part 2.
Storytime about the time a nail salon took advantage of my blindness. Sister and I got our nails done. We used to go all the time, and while the lady was doing my nails, she asked me how I knew how much money I had. At the time, I used cash, never again after this, but I told her that I folded my bills a certain way. I told her that I folded my 20s different than my 10s, different than my 5s, different than my 1s. Anything of her asking that question, I think it's a good question, and I just thought she was curious. I got done with my nails, she walked me towards the front, and my sister was actually just finishing up with hers, so it was perfect. There's another man at the front, and he asked me how I knew how much money I had. I told him the same thing. Before I left to go to the nail salon, I made sure exactly how much money I had. My sister helped me count it, helped me make sure that I folded the right bills, just so I knew how much I had, how much I would spend. I gave her the money. Positive that I gave her the right amount because it was just folded, it was folded perfectly, and I counted it out. She takes it, starts talking in a different language, and then tells me that I owe her $20 more. I didn't, and I told her the exact amount I gave her. And she's like, no, you didn't give me this amount, you gave me that amount. Like for part 2.
Part 2 about how I crashed my dad's very expensive car. So like I said, everybody's taking pictures of the car, but I decided to let it go at first. I mean, there was one point where I went outside just so that way I could kind of let everybody know, hey, you're taking pictures with my car. Well, half an hour later, my boyfriend and I decided to leave, and he's obliterated. Like, we probably got 50 feet from her house, and then I had to stop the car so that way he could get out and throw up in somebody's yard. Anyway, so he gets in the car, we're on the way back to my house. And my house was like a 20-minute drive away. Well, we were 5 minutes from my house. At this one intersection, I get a green light and I go to make a right, and I accidentally hit a car turning out of the bar parking lot. So I'm literally freaking the fuck out. And my boyfriend's in the seat next to me crying for some reason. So the guy in the other car calls the cops. The cops show up, they call my stepdad and my mom. My boyfriend went to the hospital, he had alcohol poisoning. Well, my boyfriend told his mom that it was all my fault and I'm grounded for 6 months. Story time about my psychotic best friend. So we're gonna call this girl Gia. So a little background information. This all happened whenever I was in 9th grade. I saw Gia sitting at this lunch table alone and I invited her to come sit with my friends and I. And after talking to her, I found out that she was a new student and she didn't have any friends. So her and I started hanging out and we became really close. Like, she would come over my house 24/7. Well, my older sister was a grade above us, and she would act really weird around her. And by weird, I mean like she would always make fun of me in front of my sister, and weirdly enough, try to cause problems between us. My sister didn't really like her. She thought that she was weird, but because she was my friend, she was being super nice to her. Well, like a month later, she started trying to become best friends with my sister. Like, any conversation she would have, I would be like, oh, do you want to come over? She would be like, no, sorry, I'm hanging out with your sister today. And I would go home and I would be like, hey, are you hanging out with Gia today? And my sister would be like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, for part 2. Part 2 about my psychotic best friend. So like I said, my sister was like, no, what are you talking about? So at this point, I'm thinking, oh, this girl's really weird. But it gets even worse. She comes over my house one day to hang out with me and goes in my sister's room the whole time. My sister dyed her hair black, so what does she do? She dyes her hair black too. The obsession was like really fucking weird. Anyway, so the one night that Gia's over, yes, I still had her over after this because I didn't think it was really weird at the time. My sister had her boyfriend over and they were in the living room watching a movie, and the whole time Gia is begging me to go in the living room and watch the movie with them. So I'm like, fine, whatever, we'll do that. We go into the living room, we all sit on the couch, and my couch is kind of small, so like we all had to squish. So she sits her ass right next to my sister's boyfriend. Well, my sister's boyfriend got up and started freaking the fuck out. Well, turns out that Gia was trying to touch him under the blanket. So I told her to leave. The next day I got a whole paragraph of her saying that she just wanted to be like my sister because she never had an older sister.
Story time. I babysat a lot of kids in my neighborhood, and there was this one night that I was babysitting a 2-year-old. It was around 10 o'clock at night, so the kid was sleeping, and I was just sitting in the living room. In the living room, there was a big TV, a couch, and then behind me, it was a wall with a giant window. So it was really late at night, I had nothing to do, so I was Snapchatting my friends. If you Snapchat anybody, I'm sure you know that sometimes you Snapchat really fast. You don't even know or look at what you're sending. I was mass snapping all my friends, and then one of them replied 10 minutes later. And he said, "Who's that guy behind you?" And I turned around and no one was there, so I'm like, he's playing a joke on me. But then I get another Snapchat from this friend I had, and she lives all the way across the country. They don't know each other. And she said, I think there's someone outside. So I was really freaked out because I was alone. There was a giant window behind me. Apparently there was someone outside. I wasn't gonna call the child's parents because I didn't want to freak them out, but I was scared. So then I went around the house, locked all of the doors. Sorry, it's a really long story, like for part 2.
Story time about how I was dating the school shooter. Yeah. So a little background information. I was a sophomore whenever this all happened, and it was around October. Well, the one day I was sitting at lunch with my group of friends. We're all sitting there having a good time when one of my friends dares me to go over and sit with this one kid. And he was sitting alone, he was kind of shy, and of course I did because they had offered me $10, guys. Can't beat that. So I go over there, we start talking, and I realize that he's actually really nice. And he's really hot. I never really saw what he looked like because he was always wearing hoodies during school. Anyways, we started hanging out more, and eventually he said that he liked me and we started dating. The relationship seemed pretty perfect. Well, 6 months in, I think he started to trust me more because he had told me about this one group of girls that he absolutely hated. This group of girls just happened to be my friends. I didn't tell him that I was friends with these girls because they were considered controversial, like for part 2.
I genuinely just cannot right now. Hold on. So tell me why I'm at the Nelson. Dude, I got stuff to tell y'all. Oh my fucking god. So let me tell y'all what I just experienced and why I'm so upset. So I just decided to go to the nail salon because it's my day off and I had got paid or whatever. So I'm going to the nail salon, mind you, I had to pee. So I'm like, all right, can I go to the bathroom before they start doing that? So I'm like, yeah. Y'all, why the fuck did I see roaches crawling on a wall and I could not make this shit up? Y'all know I had to record, send that shit straight to my mom, that mom pick me up. But got to see it through, my boy. So there's one.
my dad got my half-brother's girlfriend pregnant. A little background information. This all happened a few years ago. Anyways, my brother was fresh out of high school and he had been dating this girl named Serena for 2 years. And my dad, for some reason, hated her. At least that's what we thought. Well, my brother didn't have a license at the time, so every time that she came over, she needed somebody to drop her off at home. So my dad would always offer to drop her off at home, even though he literally hated her. And he could have just ordered her an Uber, which is what he did with all of my friends. Well, the one night her parents called and they were like, hey, like, is Serena still there? She hasn't came home yet. And my dad said that he was dropping her off. So I called my dad and he said that they ran out of gas on the side of the road. So that was just like one incident. Well, the next morning my mom goes to get in the car for work and she finds a thong in the car. So she brings it in the house and she asks me, hey, is this yours? Meanwhile, I had never seen them before. So then she goes and asks my half-brother and my dad's whose they are, like for part 2. Story time, my boyfriend found out that his best friend got me pregnant. It was my junior year in high school and my boyfriend and I had been dating for 4 months. Well, the one night him, his friend, and I were all supposed to go to this party. My boyfriend ended up getting called into work that night, so his friend and I went. Which my boyfriend was fine with because he wanted his best friend to keep an eye on me, but he also trusted us. Anyway, so his friend and I ended up going to the party and then but the next morning I woke up, I didn't remember that at all. So fast forward, I find out that I'm pregnant. Well, me forgetting that I totally cheated on my boyfriend, I thought that it was his. Well, a week later, I get a text from his friend. And he's like, oh my god, what are we gonna do? And I'm like, what do you mean, what are we gonna do? So then he filled me in on the whole situation that I didn't remember. But I was like, there's really no chance of this because my boyfriend and I fucked like a million times and me and you fucked once. The real tea is that my boyfriend was black and his friend was white. Well, me being the bitch that I am.
Hope you guys liked this video and found it helpful. If you did, make sure you give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel. It does help support us, and let's know what videos you guys want to see.